Hi, my name is Fatima and I will speak with you about the 10 oldest languages in the world. You know, the people of the world are speak in different languages. They are speak in 1,717 languages. And if you want to learn in one of the oldest languages in the world, you would be wise to choose one of the oldest languages still spoken today. For example, Egyptian. There are a lot of different languages which are spoken today. We've done our research and compiled what we believe to be 10 of the oldest languages in the world still in use today. Timeline of some of the world's oldest languages spoken today are Egyptian first. And it was appeared in 2619 years before century. And second language of the world, the ancient language of the world, is Sanskrit. It was appeared in 1015 years before century. And third language is Greek. It was appeared in 1415 before century. And next language is Chinese. It was also appeared in 1215 before century. And Aramaic, it was appeared in 1100 before century. And next language is Hebrew. It was the oldest ancient language also. And the next language is Farsi. And the next language is Tamil. It was appeared in 300 years before our century. And the next language is Korean. And the last language is, as you know, Italian language. As a descendant of Latin, it was appeared in 100 years before our century. And these elegant and ancient languages have long histories. They've changed and adapted over the centuries and millennia. And today you can learn them and still find companions to make conversation with. And you know, how cool is that? Of course, there are a lot we don't know when you go back thousands of years. It's true that you could make an argument for the inclusion of many other old and wonderful languages, but these are the ones we were able to find the most convincing evidence for as being both ancient and in use in some form of or another today. And so, with that, we give you 10 of the oldest languages in the world that are still spoken today. The world's 10 oldest languages in the world. Okay, first, Egyptian. As I say, it was appeared in 2619 years before our century. The first known language ever was a proto-language on the African continent, and the first known proto-writing system was created in Nigeria. So it's perhaps no surprise that the oldest language on this list is also from and used in Africa, Egyptian. The first known complete sentence in ancient Egyptian was recorded in roughly 2619 before century, making it over 4017 years old. While the Egyptian language by and large hasn't been spoken by regular people since the 19th century, it's technically still in use today. The language descended from ancient Egyptian that survives today is called Coptic, and it's primarily used as the liturgical language of the Coptic Orthodox Church of Alexandria and the Coptic Catholic Church. But that's pretty remarkable, especially after over 4015 years. And next language is Sanskrit, which is oldest texts dating back to around 1500 years before our century. Sanskrit is probably the second oldest language in the world still being used today. Like Coptic, Sanskrit is largely used in religions, texts and ceremonies that persist today, with a place in Buddhism, Hinduism and Jainism. However, Sanskrit words and phrases are also frequently used by bureaucratic institutions, from missile names to school mottos in India, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Nepal and other parts of South and Southern Asia. Interestingly, several thousand people report Sanskrit as their first language on India's census, and each time it's performed, though it's believed no one speaks, it's their first language today. Why? Researchers think some individuals first is a sort of aspirational mother's tongue. Regardless of whether or not anyone's actually speaking Sanskrit at home, there are certainly people who speak and read as a second language in India and beyond, with entire universities dedicated to the study of Sanskrit, and as well as its use in prayer and meditation, and it's also in use in modern literature and music and in conversation through loan words that have made their way into other languages around the world. And the next language is third language is a Greek. It was appeared in 1415 years before our century. Moving forward just a hair in time, Greek is probably the oldest language still spoken as a primary, day-to-day language, while modern Greek has evolved significantly from the Greek spoken in ancient times. The language of Greece today is a definitely descendant of the language of Homer and those who came before him, way before him. The works of Homer are believed to have been composed between 7th and 8th centuries before our century. Greek, the first attested iteration of Greek first appeared in 1415 before our century, 700 or so years before the Odyssey hit the scene. And today, contemporary Greek has approximately 13.5 million native speakers, not too shabby after almost 3,500 years. And the fourth language is Chinese. It was appeared in 1215 years before century. Another competition for both oldest written language and oldest spoken language still in use today. Chinese is definitely both useful and backed by a long, rich history. The first attested old Chinese goes back to a set of inscriptions on oracle bones date to roughly 1215 years before century. Of course, there are many different language varieties and dialects in China today, so Chinese is a fairly broad term here. But many of today's most used varieties, including Mandarin and Cantonese languages, fall with the Sino-Tibetan language family and are descended from the old Chinese we're referencing here. When it comes to languages that are both ancient and useful, Chinese has to take the top of the list. After all, Mandarin is the single most spoken languages in the world today, with over 1.1 billion speakers. So, if you are looking to learn one of the oldest languages in the world still spoken today, you cannot go wrong if you learn Chinese. Tired of reading? Get straight to learning. Learn to speak an ancient languages with modern practically like Chinese, Italian or Arabic or busy today. And the fifth ancient language is Aramaic. It was appeared in 1100 years before our century. In the quest for the oldest living language in the world, those not versed in the culture of Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria and Turkey might not expect Aramaic to appear on the list. However, Aramaic is quite ancient. The Aramaic alphabet was the precursor to both the Hebrew and Arabic alphabets. But Aramaic, the language spoken by Armenians in ancient Syria and the first attested in 1100 before century, has survived well into its first millennium. In fact, among these oldest languages in use today, it's actually more lively of living language than Sanskrit or Coptic. There are somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million speakers of Neo-Aramaic languages in the world today. Who knew? And the next language is the sixth ancient language of the world is Hebrew. It was appeared in 1000 years before our century. And speaking of the Hebrew alphabet, Hebrew was the first attested only around 100 years after Aramaic, in 1000 years before our century, making it another member of the oldest language still in use club. Hebrew is perhaps unique on this list as a language that ceased to be a common mother tongue for some time, but was eventually successfully revived as a living language. Hebrew was primarily used for religious text, correspondence, and communications between Jewish people who otherwise didn't share language from around the 2nd century onwards. And it was revived as a spoken language by activists in the 19th century, starting in Germany. Today, there are over 9 million speakers of modern Hebrew, about 5 million of whom speak it as a first language. And the next language is Farsi. As you know, Farsi is the most famous ancient language of the world. It was a period 522 before our century, and while not the earliest known language in the Iranian language family, Farsi is the longest surviving spoken language of the Iranian family of languages. It takes its roots from Old Persian, which was first attested somewhere between 522 and 486 before our century. According to the Department of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies of UNIC, I can say there are roughly 7 million native Farsi speakers and 110 million speakers of the languages total around the world today. And there are communities of native Farsi speakers in Iran still today, but also in Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, Iraq, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and of course in Uzbekistan, as well as in Persian diasporic communities worldwide. And the 8th language, ancient language of the world is Tamil. It was appeared in 300 years before our century, one of the official languages of Singapore, Sri Lanka, and the state of Tamil Nadu in southern India. Tamil is another wonderful language with a long and storied history. It's frequently cited as a language in India, if not the world that has the most direct line back to its classical roots in terms of how it has evolved over time. And with over 75 million native speakers, it's certainly not to say it remains in use as a common first language. When you speak to Tamil enthusiasts, they may tell you it's the oldest language in the world, and in some ways that might be true. According to Russian linguists Dr. Mikhail Andropov, Tamil descended from Proto-Dravidian and Proto-language reconstruction, which may have been in use as far back as the 4th millennium before our century, and which, if true, would make it the oldest language on this list. But it's a little hard to prove. What we do know, it's the old Tamil can be attested back to 300 years before century, which is still nothing to scoff at. And I can say Tamil, the oldest language or not, it's certainly ancient language and a hardly language to speak. If you are thinking about dropping by the southern part of India or Sri Lanka or Singapore, you can speak in this language also. And the 9th language, which is ancient language, is Korean language. I think everyone know Korean language. It was appeared 57 years before our century. and it's a language. No top 10 list about the oldest language in the world still spoken today would be complete without Korean language, of course. Another language that dates back thousands of years, spoken as the primary language in both North and South Korea. There are at least 77 million native speakers of Korean today. There is some dispute about when exactly Proto-Koreanic language transitioned into Old Korean. But it's clear that by the Silla state established in 57 before century. And there was a Koreanic language or proto-language in use. And interestingly, the older Korean writing system known as Hanja, based on Chinese characters and can be dated back to 400 years before century, and the Gojoseon period when Yemeic and extinct Koreanic language from Manchuria and Eastern Korea was the common language in that time. The Hangul phonetic characters unique to the Korean language today weren't developed until the 15th century. They're practically new. And the last ancient language in the world which are spoken today is Italian language. As you know, it was a descendant of Latin and was appeared in 100 years before our century. Last but certainly not least, we have Italian. As you may have gathered, it can be though to determine the oldest language still in use without getting into the lineage of a language. Where do you draw the line between historical and modern languages if one began the other? Early Latin was used in the Roman Republic, certainly by 75 years before century, but possibly much earlier the Roman Republic was formed. And after some deliberation, Italian made its way onto the list as the most direct modern descendant of Latin, though any of the Roman languages could have made it really. So why pick Italian? Because Italian remains the language of Rome and descended directly from the vulgar Latin of the Roman Empire through Italy in the Middle Ages. Today, Italian has about 67 million native speakers in the European Union and beyond, and many more choose to learn Italian for its beauty. And before we wrap this thing up, there is one special mention, the Arabic language. If you think Italian's a bit of the stretch, then Arabic might be your 10th language on the list of these oldest languages in the world. And also Arabic can be traced back to the 1st century and its modern descendant is spoken by over 300 million people. And that makes it terrifically hardly to learn Arabic, both for history buffs and modern travelers. And there you have it. Those are some of the 10 oldest languages still spoken in the world today. And of course, when you are talking about the new languages of the world, about the ancient languages of the world, some of the accounts get a little murky. So if you know something were missed, feel free to wait in the comments. As you know, Navoi was a famous poet of Turkish nation, and he was create his poems and his writings in Farsi language. And also I can say that the Korean language also was very difficult language, especially Korean alphabets was difficult because before 15th century, and there was a king who created a new alphabet for common people. And Uzbek language was the first. Our famous writers like Navoi was created their novels, their poems in Farsi languages also. But now, as you know, in our history, we can see that a lot of alphabets were changed in Uzbek alphabets. For example, Before in 19th, 14th years, there was a Latin alphabet, and after that, when Soviet Union became, there were Kirill alphabet also. But now, as you know, we are also write in Latin languages. And at the end of my speech, I want to say something and some information about Uzbek language also. You know, as you know, Uzbek language also, the history of our language there were a lot of changes in Uzbek alphabet also. And for example, in history, we know there were Latin alphabet, then it became Cyrillic alphabet, then Arabic, and when we were independent, as you know, there is an alphabet in Latin letters. And before our writers, like famous writers like Nawawi, were created their poems in Farsi alphabet also. So our Uzbek language are also very ancient and very old. Thank you for your attention and goodbye.